10 decisions made by one of the greatest labels ever, and every one of them nearly buried the Spinners before the world got "I'll Be Around." You know the songs. Then Came You, Rubber Band Man, but Motown had them first. For 9 years, nearly lost them for good. This is how it almost never happened, and how one call from Aretha Franklin changed everything. Number 10, the label they got buried on. 1963, Harvey Fuqua sells his label, Tri-Fi, to his brother-in-law. And just like that, 5 guys from Ferndale, Michigan, become property of Berry Gordy. You'd think that's the beginning of the story. The lucky break. Motown, at the absolute height of its power, about to turn out hit after hit after hit for anyone who walked through that door. Except the Spinners don't go to Motown. Not really. They get filed onto VIP Records, a subsidiary, a label within the label, built to hold the artists Motown wasn't ready to bet on yet. Stevie's on Tamla. The Temptations and the Four Tops are on Gordy and Motown proper, front and center. The Spinners, they're in the basement, 1 floor down from the acts everybody actually talks about. And if you've ever taken a job you thought was your big break, only to slowly realize you'd been quietly filed under maybe later, you know exactly what that feels like. It's not rejection. Nobody tells you no. That's the cruel part. Nobody sits you down and says it's over. You're technically in the building. You've got the name on the letterhead. You're just not in the room where anything actually happens. Here's the thing about VIP. It wasn't a punishment, and that's what made it so hard to fight. It was neutral, a holding pattern with a label stamped on it. The kind of decision that doesn't look like a mistake in the moment, because nobody's actively hurting you. They're just not helping you either. And 5 guys who'd already spent years grinding through Detroit's doo-wop circuit, who'd already scored 1 real hit with "That's What Girls Are Made For" back on Tri-Fi, back when they were the ones driving the momentum, go from having a career trajectory to having a mailing address. What's wild is this wasn't even rare at Motown. Berry Gordy ran that label like a machine, with way more parts than engine room. Somebody had to be in the back seat while somebody else drove. Nobody sat down in 1963 and decided the Spinners would be the group who'd eventually outsell half the roster. Nobody could have known that yet. All anybody knew was that the front office had a stack of acts and not enough studio hours, and priorities had to be made. The Spinners just kept landing on the wrong side of that math, year after year. But Motown wasn't done making decisions about the Spinners. Not even close. Number 9, the decision to make them drivers, not artists. So picture this. You signed with the biggest black-owned record label in America. You believed, really believed, that you were about to become recording artists. That the years of talent shows in small venues and grinding through the Detroit scene were finally about to pay off. Instead, you're driving the Jackson 5 around Detroit. That's not a joke. That's not an exaggeration for effect. Members of the Spinners were, by multiple accounts, put to work doing odd jobs around the Motown building while they waited for studio time that kept not coming. Henry Fambro, one of the founding members, the guy who'd been there since 1954, since the group was still called the Domingos, ended up working as a chauffeur for Berry Gordy's own mother. If you've ever taken a temporary side job just to stay afloat while you waited for your real shot to finally arrive, and then watched months turn into years without it ever showing up, you already know how that sits in your chest. It's not that the work is beneath anyone. Driving somebody's mother around is honest work. It's that every single day behind that wheel is a day you're not behind a microphone. And eventually you start to wonder if the microphone is ever coming at all. Here's the part that gets me. The Temptations were on the same lot. The Four Tops were on the same lot. Marvin Gaye was cutting records a few doors down. The Spinners could hear the hits being made through the walls. Literally hear it. They just weren't the ones making them. Imagine clocking in every day to the building where your dream is happening and going home every night having spent the day behind a steering wheel instead of a microphone stand. Some of y'all already know exactly what this felt like. Watching people around you get chosen while you're still waiting for someone to remember your name. That's a specific kind of patience. The kind that either builds you into something tougher or slowly wears you all the way down. Motown didn't do this out of cruelty. That's important to say, and I mean it. This is a label that, at the exact same time, was building the most important black music catalog in American history. A genuine cultural miracle, assembled in real time. But greatness at that scale means somebody gets triaged. Somebody gets told to wait, quietly, while the machine runs. And in the early to mid-60s, the Spinners got triaged straight into the parking lot. Turning artists into errand runners, while the clock kept running on their careers, and nobody was in a hurry to explain why. Real talk, only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 8, the decision to let a signed act sit silent. Here's a number that should stop you cold. After signing with Motown, the Spinners went over a year without setting foot in a real recording session. Not a slow rollout, not a delayed release date pushed back a few weeks. A full year of a signed, contracted act, sitting completely silent, while the label around them cranked out some of the most important music of the 20th century, one hit after another, seemingly every other week. And here's what gets me about this. It wasn't for lack of talent. Anybody who'd heard Bobby Smith's lead voice knew it could stop a room cold. Purvis Jackson's bass was the kind of sound you feel in your chest before you consciously register it as music. This wasn't a group that needed development, or coaching, or time to figure out who they were. They needed one thing: a studio door to open. You know how that feels, right? Being ready, actually ready, not hoping you're ready, and just waiting on somebody else's calendar to catch up to you, with no timeline, no explanation, nothing to do but keep showing up. Then came the lineup shuffle nobody talks about enough. George Dixon out, Chico Edwards in, then eventually out too. The group cycling through voices while trying to hold a sound together, all without the studio time to actually define what that sound even was. It's hard to build an identity in silence. You need reps. You need somebody pressing record again and again so you can hear yourselves becoming something. Instead, they were rehearsing for a session that kept not getting scheduled. And I'll say this plainly, because it's the honest read on what happened here. A full year of silence for a signed act isn't really an accident. It's a decision made over and over. Somebody, somewhere in that building, decided the Spinners could wait. Every choice about who gets a producer this week, who gets studio time this month, who gets pushed to the front of the line. That's triage. And triage is a decision, remade every single week. That group didn't get called in. Nobody had to say it out loud for it to be true. By the time they finally did get real studio time, years of momentum they'd built back on Tri-Fi, that early hit, that promising start, had just evaporated. Gone, the way momentum always goes when nobody feeds it. You don't get that back. You only get to start building it again from absolute zero, with less patience left than you started with. And they were about to start building with the one person at Motown who actually looked past the parking lot and saw something worth saving. Number 7, the decision to shelve their own best songs. January 27, 1970. Stevie Wonder walks into Motown's Snake Pit studio with the Funk Brothers to cut a song he wrote for his friend G.C. Cameron, the Spinners' lead singer at the time. Stevie plays keys himself. Stevie plays some of the drums himself too, because he couldn't quite get the feel he wanted any other way. Cameron nails the vocal in one take. No rehearsal takes, no do-overs, just one pass and it's there. The song is It's a Shame. And it is, by every account, exactly what the Spinners needed after nearly a decade of waiting. A real song, a real producer, and not just any producer, Stevie Wonder, at the absolute peak of his powers, betting his own credibility and his own studio time on a group Motown had all but forgotten existed. And Motown sat on it for nearly a year. That's a mouthful to say out loud, and it doesn't get any less strange the more you sit with it. The label had, sitting right there in its own vault, a finished Stevie Wonder production that would go on to become the Spinners' biggest hit of their entire Motown career, and they let it sit, untouched, unreleased. while the group that recorded it kept waiting to find out if anyone upstairs even remembered they existed, let alone had something this good on tape. If you've ever poured everything into something, a project, an audition, a piece of yourself you handed over hoping somebody would finally notice, and then had to just wait, not knowing if anyone on the other end was even paying attention, that particular kind of limbo is its own quiet kind of exhausting. It's worse than a no you can move past. Silence you just carry. Here's what's wild about the timing, too. Stevie wasn't some new kid trying to get a foot in the door with a favor. This was his first time producing another act entirely by himself. A real professional swing at proving he could do more than sing, not a favor tossed off between his own sessions. And still, the tape sat in a drawer somewhere for the better part of a year while everybody involved just waited. When It's a Shame finally dropped in June of 1970, it climbed to number 14 on the pop chart, number 3 on the R&B chart, the biggest hit the Spinners had ever had at Motown, full stop. Proof, undeniable, chart position proof, the kind no executive can argue with, of exactly what they were capable of the whole time they'd been sitting in that basement. Which makes the fact that Motown almost never let anyone hear it feel less like an oversight, and more like a pattern that had been running the whole time. Number 6, the decision to treat them as a favor, not a priority.
Love affair is when you're down is up, when you're up is down.
It's a Shame wasn't just a hit. It was proof of concept, sitting right there on the charts for anyone at Motown who cared to look.
She wrote a line or two upon the wall.
Proof that with the right writer, the right producer, the Spinners could compete with anybody else on that roster. The Temptations, the Four Tops, anybody.
To pay the price. And though you know you're right, but you
So here's the decision that should have followed, the obvious next move.
one of a kind, one of a kind. Love affair is.
Motown should have built a real songwriting pipeline around them, assigned them a dedicated producer, the way the Temptations had Norman Whitfield in their corner, entry after entry, hit after hit. The way the Four Tops had Holland Dozier Holland writing specifically for their voices. A real relationship, built to last years, not months.
My destiny. You can be sure.
Instead, Stevie Wonder went back to being Stevie Wonder's own artist, chasing his own solo career, which, fair enough, that's his story to tell. But It's a Shame stayed a one-time favor between two friends.
To make a little sacrifice, you make it for love.
Not a formula the label chose to repeat, invest in, or build a whole strategy around, even after it worked exactly the way everyone hoped.
Since I met you,
Years later, Stevie Wonder himself would put it plainly in an interview about exactly this era. Writers, he said, are so important. That was the whole issue, in his own words.
love a kind, love affair.
Groups like the Spinners left labels like Motown because the writers, the actual engine underneath every single hit record, weren't being pointed at them consistently. One great song from a friend isn't a career. It's a moment, and moments fade fast if nobody builds on them. And I'll be honest with you, I think this might be the most underrated decision on this whole list. Everybody remembers the shelved tape because it's the dramatic one, the easy one to point at. Nobody talks about the fact that Motown had the blueprint sitting right there in their hands, proven, chart-tested, undeniable, and chose not to run it back a second time. You know what's worse than never getting a shot? Getting exactly one. Getting the proof that it works, in black and white, on the Billboard charts for the whole industry to see. And then watching the door quietly close again anyway, like nothing happened. If you've ever been the person who did the thing everyone said you couldn't do, and still didn't get the follow-up opportunity you'd clearly, obviously earned, you know that particular flavor of frustration. It's not anger exactly. It's closer to grief, the grief of watching your own proof get ignored. Some of y'all already have an opinion about whether this was Motown's biggest miss with this group. I'd argue it might be. Not the silence early on. Not even the shelved tape. The refusal to build on the one thing that had already, undeniably, worked. Number 5, the decision to waste the momentum. It's a shame, gave the Spinners something they'd never once had in 9 years at that label. Every day we'll find things to do. Real chart position, real radio play, coast to coast, a real hungry audience that was finally actually paying attention to them specifically. The follow-up single was called We Got It Made, and it came nowhere close to repeating the moment. Not even close. Here's the thing about follow-up singles that people outside the industry don't always understand. They're not really about the song itself. They're about everything surrounding the song. The push, the promotional dollars, the label deciding, in a room full of executives, that this is the moment to spend real resources because you finally have the audience's attention and you don't want to waste a second of it. And by nearly every account of that era, the Spinners didn't get that push. They got a shot at the charts and, comparatively, a whisper of support behind it. If you've ever finally gotten someone's attention, a boss, an audience, someone whose opinion actually mattered to your future, and felt that window start closing again, almost as fast as it opened, you know exactly how that specific kind of momentum works. It doesn't wait for you politely, it's not patient, and it doesn't care how hard you work to earn it. You either feed it immediately, with everything you've got, or it goes cold on its own timeline, not yours. And that's exactly what happened here. The follow-up didn't come close to duplicating It's a Shame. Not because the Spinners suddenly got worse at what they did, the talent hadn't gone anywhere. Because the machine behind them simply didn't move at the speed the moment required, and by the time anybody upstairs reconsidered, the moment had already passed them by. This is the part where the group's own frustration finally starts showing up outside the music. Not in the recordings themselves. The music stayed professional, stayed sharp, stayed exactly as good as it had always been. In the room, in the meetings. In the growing hardening sense, according to multiple accounts from people close to the group in that period, that Motown simply wasn't ever going to take them seriously, no matter what the charts said, no matter what proof they put on the board. You can can survive being overlooked when you don't know any better yet. It's a genuinely different kind of heartbreak once you've already proven yourself, with real numbers, and still watch the door stay stubbornly half shut anyway. Number 4. The decision written into a contract. Here's something most fans don't know until they really dig into this story, past the surface level version everyone repeats. When the Spinners' Motown contract finally expired in 1972, and the group made the collective call to leave for Atlantic, they couldn't all walk out together. Not because anyone changed their mind, because the paperwork itself wouldn't let them. G.C. Cameron, the voice on It's a Shame, the guy who'd personally carried their biggest hit to the top of the charts, had a different contract than the rest of the group. He'd fallen in love with and married Gwen Gordy, Berry Gordy's own sister. And that meant his ties to Motown ran through more than just a standard recording agreement. They ran through family.
Sam Cooke, you can get funky tonight. Let me hear you say, yeah.
I didn't fully understand the shape of this until I started digging into it myself, and it's more human than the way it usually gets told. This wasn't one dramatic decision Motown made in a single boardroom meeting. It was smaller, quieter than that, a contract structured differently from the beginning. A relationship that tied one member's entire future to the label in a way the other 4 members never had, through no real fault of anyone's own choosing at the time it was signed. And when the moment finally came for the whole group to walk, that difference meant their lead singer physically, legally, could not walk with them.
Do you remember the late and great Otis Redding?
If you've ever watched a team you built together get separated, not because anyone did anything wrong, not because of some betrayal or falling out, just because one person's circumstances quietly pulled them somewhere the rest of you couldn't follow. You know that's a different kind of loss than the ones we usually talk about. It's not betrayal. Nobody's the villain in this version of the story. It's just that the math didn't work out the same way for everybody involved, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that once the ink was already dry. And here's the part that still genuinely gets me every time I think about it.
Hey, baby,
Cameron didn't leave them stranded on his way out the door. He personally recommended his own cousin, a singer named Philippe Wynne, who'd already been rehearsing informally with the group on the side, to step into the spot he was leaving behind. One door closing on him, and the man walking through it holding it open for somebody else, instead of just letting it shut. Some of you already know how this turns out. Wynne becomes the voice on nearly every classic Spinners hit that follows for the rest of the decade. But in that moment, in 1972, standing in the middle of it, nobody knew that yet. All anybody knew was that the group everyone thought they finally understood was about to look completely different, with no guarantee any of it would work.
You see, Otis used to walk a lot. I think if Otis was...
Number 3, the decision Motown let someone else make. By 1972, the Spinners' Motown contract was up, and waiting in the wings, watching all of this play out from the outside, was Aretha Franklin.
I really don't want too much.
Detroit royalty, through and through. A woman who knew exactly what talent looked like when it wasn't being used right, because she'd spent her own career fighting to be used right. She knew their contract was ending, and she made a suggestion that would end up quietly changing American music history. Go to Atlantic Records instead. Her own label, a place that, at that point, had no track record at all with this specific group. Now here's the decision that actually belongs to Motown in all of this. The one that's easy to miss, not the suggestion itself. That credit is entirely Aretha's. The decision is what Motown didn't do in response. They didn't counter. They didn't make a real aggressive case for why five guys who'd just proven themselves with a genuine hit record should stay. By most accounts, the group's contract was simply allowed to run out, quietly, with no real fight behind it. Want to know the strangest part? This is the exact same label that would go to war, publicly and privately, to keep its biggest franchise stars in-house.
You know, Ralph, you know me. All I want is a good man. Treat me right.
And here was a group that had already shown in plain black and white chart numbers exactly what they could do. And the label let a friend of a friend make the pitch that Motown itself never even bothered to counter.
When you get home, I'm gonna do it for you like it's supposed to be done.
If you've ever watched someone you genuinely cared about get scooped up by an opportunity you could have offered first, if you'd only moved a little faster, you know that specific ache.
What you want?
Aretha simply saw value where Motown had spent 9 long years quietly training itself not to look anymore. And if you're nodding right now, thinking about every time you've watched somebody's real potential get recognized by literally anyone except the people who had them first, you're not alone. That's one of the most human patterns there is. Number 2, the decision to let them walk mid-album. Here's a detail that gets left out of almost every retelling of this story, even by people who know the broad strokes well. When the Spinners finally left Motown in 1972, they weren't just cleanly leaving. They were, by some accounts, still in the middle of production on their next project, one connected to Stevie Wonder, the very same collaborator who'd already proven exactly what he could do for this group 2 years earlier with It's a Shame. Think about that for a second. Really sit with it. The label had, right there in the building, the one person who'd already unlocked the Spinners' biggest hit, the one combination that had already been chart-tested and proven. And instead of doubling down in that final stretch, instead of saying, "We already know this exact formula works, let's finish what we started before we lose them," Motown let the group walk out the door mid-process, unfinished business and all. That's not neglect anymore. Neglect is what happened back in the parking lot in 1963, when nobody knew what they had yet. This, in 1972, is watching the exact formula that already worked once, sitting right there in front of you and choosing not to finish it anyway, with the exit door already open. Here's the thing about almost finished work. It's the hardest kind to lose, harder than something that never got started at all. If you've ever built something halfway, a project, a relationship, a plan you believed in, and watched it get abandoned right before completion, not because it stopped working, but because everyone involved simply stopped believing it mattered enough to see through to the end.
Say that you're sure to find true love.
That's its own specific kind of grief. It's not failure exactly. It's worse than failure in a way. It's proof of what could have been, left sitting there unfinished on purpose for anyone to see later. And that's where the story should have a happy ending for Motown, if you're rooting for them at this point. It doesn't.
It seems like you'll never find some.
Because the Spinners walked out that door in 1972, carrying 9 years of near misses behind them, one massive hit that nobody ever bothered to build on, and a lead singer who legally couldn't even come with them. By every reasonable measure anyone could have applied at the time, they should have been a cautionary tale. A group that history remembers as one that never quite got there, a footnote in somebody else's Motown story.
You'll soon discover a mighty love. And sometimes
Except decision number 1 is coming. And it's not a Motown decision at all. It's the moment right after, when this entire story almost repeated itself somewhere else entirely, on a completely different label, with completely different people. Number 1, the decision that almost ended it all again.
Every time I need you.
Here's what nobody tells you about the Spinners signing with Atlantic Records in 1972. It almost didn't work there either, not even close. Atlantic paired the group, now fronted by Philippe Wynne, Cameron's cousin, stepping into a legacy he'd barely had time to prepare for, with a producer named Jimmy Roach. 4 songs were recorded together. All 4 went nowhere. 0 hits, 0 real momentum, and executives at Atlantic were reportedly ready to cut their losses and drop the group entirely. The same way it must have felt, from the inside, like Motown already had, years earlier, just in slower motion. This is the part of the story most people skip straight past to get to the good stuff everybody already knows. The Spinners didn't leave Motown and land immediately in the arms of Then Came You and Grammy nominations and gold records. They left one label that had nearly buried them alive for 9 years and walked straight into a second label that was, right at that moment, on the verge of doing the exact same thing all over again. And if you've ever escaped a situation that genuinely wasn't working for you, only to find yourself right back inside a version of the same problem somewhere brand new. You know how that particular despair sits differently than it did the first time around. The first time, you don't know any better. The second time, you start to wonder, quietly, if maybe it's you, if maybe you're the common variable in the equation. But here's the moment that changes absolutely everything, the hinge the whole story turns on. A producer named Thom Bell had actually backed the Spinners on piano once, years earlier, at a small gig in Philadelphia. Long before any of this drama, long before anybody was famous or desperate or afraid of getting dropped. He remembered them. He remembered that sound, and when he heard they were on the chopping block at Atlantic, he asked for a shot. Just one. And Atlantic, for once in this entire 9-year saga, actually said yes. what happened next wasn't a decision that nearly ruined them. It's the one, finally, that didn't. I'll Be Around hit number 3 on the pop chart and topped the R&B chart outright. Then came Could It Be I'm Falling in Love? Then came You with Dionne Warwick, the very first number 1 pop hit either of their careers had ever produced for either artist. Then Rubber Band Man, climbing all the way to number 2. 10 decisions, nearly 10 years, one label after another that almost let them disappear entirely, for reasons that made sense in the moment and look almost unthinkable in hindsight. And one producer, in the right room at exactly the right moment, who finally didn't let it happen again.